Welcome, everybody. I see you in the chat room to Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting edge conversation while exploring the quantum possibility. And I said it that way on purpose because we're really going to do it tonight. Tonight's a little bit different, than what we've done in the recent past, or in the historic past. Even we're gonna dip our toe into the pond, where it's a little bit controversial, and that's why we're having technical interference. We're trying to get Augie to call in because he can't seem to get his computer to bring him up. And before we get started, and before I tell you about our amazing guest, I just want to thank you all. We have a few people that have joined our membership group, our membership community. We're waiting for more people to join. The first 10 people that join gets a free copy of Augie's book. So be sure to join us. And as soon as we have 15 people, we're going to kick off with our private conversation and with the exclusive content that is only for the membership community. So join us. It's a more intimate forum. It's where you get to interact with Augie and I. It's where Augie and I share things that we're not ready to share with the general population at large. And you get questions and answers, and just like a closer friendship than what this kind of platform offers. So the link will be in the chat, and the link is also on the YouTube page. So my friend tonight, I'm so happy to have Omar with us. He's such a beautiful soul. He's one of the most transparent and honest people that I've met. So genuine and comes from the heart. And make sure that you have a pen and a paper, because you're going to want Omar's information so that you can follow him. Augie was going to do the bio, so I'm a little lacking in the bio, but that's okay. Augie will be here and we'll get him to talk about Omar. Omar has Watchers Talk, which you can see in the corner of his page, his square on YouTube here on Zoom. And he is currently being punished by the powers that be. So he's treading a little bit lightly on his channel, but he will be back. And he's also got another channel where he is uncensored. So you're going to want the information on that too. So Omar, welcome, my friend. So happy to have you here with us.
Thank you, Nori. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Augie. I appreciate it. And it should be a great conversation this evening. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we get started, will you tell people where to find you, and then we'll put it back in the chat as the time goes on.
Yeah, I can be found in two places, or actually three places. One is on YouTube, my channel, Watchers Talk. And then second place is my website, theprojectionofview.com. And then I can also be found on Odyssey, which is my non-censored platform where I can, openly talk without being punished by these globalist Cabalists. And it's the same name, Watchers Talk. And I don't think anybody else in the world uses that name. So if you just push in Watchers Talk, it pops up really, anywhere. I have accounts on Twitter and things like that, but I don't really participate within those things. And YouTube is sort of really my main thing, because I started off on Facebook, and then Facebook, of course, canceled me, deleted me, and kicked me out. And then I moved here to YouTube like 6 years ago, and then just building on YouTube. But I have a backup channel on YouTube as well called Watchers Talk Network. And thankfully, that hasn't been touched yet.
Good to know. Yay.
Yeah, I learned the algorithm now, and they're gonna be like, "Wait a minute."
wait, what? We gotta dip into that now. Well, I'm so excited for tonight's talk because we're going to discuss some really, really deep stuff. And we're going to be talking about the families, right? Air quotes, the families, the ones that pull the puppet strings, and we're going to be talking about where there is hidden agenda. When Omar did his, what were there, four programs on Disney?
I did, yeah, fourth one, and I was just getting into my final one, which where I was going to highlight how Disney, the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ uses in Disneyland, Disney World, and all of those facilities to mind control people and then mind control people and individuals in these places, I guess, these
Yes,
festivals or whatever, whatever
yes,
they're called, right? Is to procure children and brainwash people and to mind control people because through movies, right? They, the flicker, right? That's on your TV, right? They've figured out on how to use that flicker to mind control people, right? One example is that they can have you watch the same show over and over and over again. And right after you watched it, because of the flickering on the screen, you'll actually forget that you watched that episode. And then you'll come back and you'll watch it again and then again. And then that's
wow,
ongoing revenue and advertising revenue. So that's like one form of mind control that Disney is using. And I was just about to get into that when YouTube came up and gave me my second strike in a week because of the interview that I did with Frank Jacob a couple of days ago, where we were highlighting some, some interesting things, right? I don't want to say
yes,
here on your channel because I don't want to
yes,
jeopardize your channel, but if you guys want to see that, I have two videos on my Odyssey. One is a 12-minute cut of a particular section that's extremely important, which I feel that everyone needs to see. And because
yes,
this is breaking
yes,
information that only came out like 3 days ago, and this information needs to be shared with everyone. And of course, when Frank and I shared it, it's kind of a little bit ironic, Nori, because I was featuring Frank because Frank got canceled in Germany, and
wow,
to be canceled in Germany is essentially being canceled in the EU. So I brought Frank on to discuss that, to find out what's going on and how can we be of assistance, because we're all part of the same community. And if one of our brothers is being canceled, then we all need to step up and say, okay, well, what can we do to help you
yes,
to get past this? So anyways, as I was doing that, I myself got canceled, right? So it's a little irony there, but it is part, it is what it is. We are at war, and we're on the front lines, like yourself, myself, and everyone that's watching
yep,
in the chat room. We're all on the front lines, and we're all just being babysat. I can, it's a really what I
mhm,
can say. And so before I was going to do that, YouTube just canceled me, and now I have to kind of tread lightly on my channel because the third
yeah,
strike will essentially
right,
just kill my channel, right? So I don't
yes,
want to take that risk. And
well,
so I'm going to just tread very, very carefully as to what I do, but I'm definitely not going to stop, right?
no,
And what I'm doing, once my restriction is over, I'm still going to do my Disney and mind control. And then after that, see, Nori, what this was part of a much bigger program that I was putting together, because the original program, the actual program, is called Protocols of Saturn, and how to learn to read the symbolism that the Cabal uses, right? And this this satanic cult, the Saturn cult, uses within their language, within their logos, within their videos and such. So because I was able to understand that and decode it, I put together like this entire 8-hour video that I did last year. And I did the entire eight-hour video in one session. But then what I found is that because of my shadow ban on YouTube, that video wasn't really being offered to a lot of people, and the views on it were quite low compared to like all of my other videos. So what I thought was, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down into chapters, into individual chapters, so I can make an hour-long video, 45-minute video, so where people will look at it, say, well, okay, I can watch that. It's 45 minutes, an hour, because 8 hours, right, kind of really pushes a person back, right? It says, oh, I don't have 8 hours to watch this. So it's understandable. So that's why I kind of broke it up into 1 hour segments. And then when I got into my third chapter, I thought, hey, we're going to be jumping onto the fourth chapter. And what the fourth chapter shows us is how they came from the old world when, America was just being formulated back in the 1700s, when they came over and how they incorporated their, Saturn cult symbolism within the streets and, within the street plan, buildings, the layout of buildings, where the buildings are placed, under which stars those buildings are placed, and what powers those constellations hold, and things like that. But I thought that, I didn't cover this in my original presentation. So I thought maybe the best thing to do is to, give our fellow projections a lesson into who these people are that are putting these, streets, street maps down so they look like, pentagrams and things like that. So of
Yes.
course that's harnessing energy, and anyone who lives
Yes.
within that zone is kind of
Yes.
trapped within that zone, and unknowingly their loosh is being, hijacked from them. So I thought, okay, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll, do this lecture on some of the most powerful families in the world, who are the
Yes.
administrators and the managers. And so I dug in and went into my notes and then found 300 families that actually, are the administrators and managers of this world, and actually work for someone who comes from up there. And then within those 300 families, there's about 13 to 15 families who have like the real power, right? Which they're the front of this of this cabal, so to say. And within those 13 families, there's like 2 or 3 families that are like ultra secret, right? To where it's very, very difficult to get genealogy information on them, to get any type of economic information on them, to get any type of business information. It's extremely difficult because they've been at it for a couple thousand years, and they've learned to hide their tracks very, very well. And so I thought I would do that. And I began doing that to highlight on what we're dealing with, right? Because we can look on the ground, we can look on TV, social media, and we can be told that the Rothschilds, are doing this, and the Stonefellers are doing this, and all these people are, doing this. But what does that mean, right? Like to the average viewer, to the average mortgage payer, what do they think? They're going to think, okay, well, the Rothschilds are the Rothschilds. They're very rich. They're bankers, and that's it. We're just going to move on, and they have no idea as to the depth that they have. So I began to highlight that, when they came over, they began creating, their, CFR, the Council of Foreign Relations, and the UN, the 3 world wars that are going to happen, all of that. So I wanted to put that into a package and give it to my viewers, and I did, and I was able to give that to them. And then of course I got stopped at the very end with my final chapter of Disney. But in fact, Nori, that is not the final chapter of Disney. There's one more chapter that comes after that, but unfortunately I can't stream that to my channel because it has to do with a Disney movie called Fantasia. Right, Fantasia came out in the early 1920s, and that movie is a principal mind control tool that they use, because in that movie there's no words. In that movie, it's just images and an orchestra music in the background, and then the music and the imagery that kind of hypnotizes you. And then once you get hypnotized through the flicker of the screen and through other objects on the screen, they begin to control your mind, and then they can insert ideas into your head, and then even later on are able to trigger those ideas so that you'll carry out whatever it is that you've been triggered to do. So because I can't put that movie onto my YouTube channel, of course they're going to hit it with a copyright and say, oh, you're not allowed using this, you're demonetized, you're off YouTube, and beat it. Right. So I thought, okay, I'm going to put that on my website. And so I was going to put that on my website after this particular chapter that I was going to do. And then within that film, I have, an entire text written, right, second by second, as the movie goes along, to highlight exactly what we're seeing on screen, exactly what we're hearing with our ears, and how that's going to be able to, how we can avert being controlled by this particular movie, because we know that there's a lot of other Fantasia movies that have been released since the first ones, and then all of them are the template of this first one. So when we
Yes.
show those films to our children are being brain programmed, and they can
Yes.
be triggered, right? We
Yes.
see all of this going on, publicly in the States, right? And for me, like the guy in Colorado, right? For me, that is a 100% example of someone that was mind controlled and then was triggered to do something that they normally would not do, right? And it's out of character for those people to do that. So that's, in short, right? That's kind of where I'm at.
Right. And just maybe to go back, well, what's coming to mind is the symbolism in those movies. I watched your presentations, and the sexual innuendo. It's not even innuendo. It's blatant if you know where to look, and there was the eye chart, right? It was a cartoon, and it's all funny, haha. And this, character is going to do the eye chart, and the eye chart says what? Something Illuminati fellas, or what was it? What did they tell me?
That was follow the Illuminati, or learn from the Illuminati. But when the frame is like fully on, I think it was like Donald Duck, right? And then the frame went halfway like this, and it kind of switched to him, and you can just see him, but you can see the eye chart in the background, right? And then the eye chart was cut in half. And then within that chart, one of the words was Ka, right? Ka is the life force in Egyptian. And then the second word was, I don't want to say, it comes from a man, right? Comes from a man. And then the third one was boys, right? Something to do with like delicious boys or something like that. And then off to the side of those words, you can see like a splatter shot, how you see in those XXX movies and things like that. You get that. And then that's like clearly right there for you to consume and to take in without knowing what you're consuming and taking in, because subliminally you're just going to be looking at Donald Duck. You're not going to be looking at the Illuminati symbol in the background, but subconsciously you're picking that up, right?
Or so, Mickey Mouse's hat, right? Mickey Mouse's hat.
Yeah,
which exactly. A penis. It's a penis, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, on one of the films that is the cover, is the filial, right? I forgot which movie it is, but just right in the middle, right, is a great big boner for children to look at. But that's nothing. That is absolute. That's just scraping. Really, Nori, is scraping the top. It's the tip of the iceberg, right? Because get deeper into Disney, there's a lot more going on there. Like for instance, the rabbit hole. I forgot which movie it was, but it's a tree, right? It's a tree, and then this rabbit, you're gonna go down the rabbit hole. But when you actually look at the rabbit hole, it looks like a vagina. It's absolute and identical to vagina. You'd have to be retarded to like not see that. And our children are seeing that. My children saw that.
Yes.
Right. And that's what upsets me, is the fact that my children saw that. And at the time, I had no idea that this was what they were consuming. Now that I know, right, it angers me. And I've been trying to, raise the flag on it, right? Yelling from rooftops. It's like, hey, throw away your Disney movies. They're not, don't keep them. They're bad. They carry bad energy, bad luge. But, again, when it comes to Walt Disney himself, he was a pervert, right? Himself, and he was a pedophile. So, I'm not too surprised that type of innuendo is, within his movies. And in fact, it was so bad during my research into Walt Disney, I discovered that his innuendos were so bad that he wanted to add into the cartoons that editors would sit there for hours and hours and hours editing out the things, right, that he would want on there, like asses, right? Donald Duck going up and squeezing, asses on people and things like that. Because this guy, he had an obsession with asses, right? I don't know what it was, but this guy,
So
I don't know.
what's his connection with the families?
Okay, so Walt Disney connection to the families is that he owns Walt Disney, right? Because you see, back in the day, before after World War I, the American public was angry at Hollywood because all they were producing was smut and just dirty movies. That's all they were doing. And then when Walt Disney came around, right, he was giving you family entertainment. It was clean entertainment, right? And then when he started to do that, the mob stepped in, the Kennedys stepped in, the Oasis stepped in. And then when they stepped in, they essentially hijacked and took control of Disney from him and his cartoons because they pretty much own Hollywood. And then that's how his connection comes in, because when he built Fantasyland and Disneyland and Disney World and stuff, he got commissioned by the United States government in World War II to put out propaganda films. And then once he put out those propaganda films, the United States government learned that, in fact, that Disney is a very good tool for them to use to control people, because there was one video that he did with Donald Duck, and you see Donald Duck paying his taxes to the IRS very happily. And then after that, the phenomenon happened that everyone in the country was happy to pay their taxes to the IRS. And then when the government learned about that, they went and procured Disneyland from Walt Disney, made him into an FBI agent and a CIA spook, and then who knows what else. And then they began to use his facilities, because underneath the facilities, there's tunnels, right? There's lots and lots and lots of tunnels underneath these facilities. And then the government started to go in there and grab kids, because you got tens of thousands of them, and if 1, 2, 3, 5 go missing, right, it's no big deal, right? They'll be like, oh well, we're looking for them, and that's it. Meanwhile, they're down in the tunnels being used for who knows, right? I don't even want to think about it. I've been there, done that, and I've had enough. I had to actually do an intention before. When you were lighting the candle, I was like, oh man. And that's really that Walt Disney's connection there. When it comes to like bloodlines, he really doesn't have like a bloodline connection, right, and to the old world and to the old families. He does come from France, right? And the way I understand his name is it was back in France, it was D with a hyphen and then Isni, right? And then when they moved over here to the New World, they took the hypophory out, and then they put the D, and then it just became Disney, right? So Disney is actually, a made up name, right? It's not actually, their real name. So that's the connection. That's the only connection that that I found personally for me, right, to include into my families, which I found was important, is that through this entertainment, people are being brainwashed. All of the world thinks that Walt Disney is clean entertainment, and showing that it clearly is not. But when we get into other things, Nori, Walt Disney just doesn't do cartoons. Walt Disney owns like 6 or 7 other studios, and the smut that the American people were angry about after World War I, they just simply moved it to other companies, right? So Walt Disney, right, still keeps that image up of clean, wholesome family entertainment, but behind it, right, behind it, they own other companies in which they're continuing to produce smut type of content, to where they're sexualizing our children, right? They're hypersexualizing our children. And then when our children see this on screen, whether it's a movie, whatever the case may be, right, then they mimic that. They want to be that, right? They think, oh, well, these girls look like that. They're sexy. The world thinks that they're sexy. I need to look like that. And the next thing you know, we have a shit show that's going on. So for me, I thought it was very, very important for me to highlight that. It's just as important as the Rothschilds and the Fellers and the Onassis and the Kennedys. To me, it's just as important, if not more important, because more people watch those movies than they actually sit there and deal with the DuPonts and things like that, right? So that's the reason why I added that in there. It actually shouldn't even be part of the bloodlines, because there is no bloodline there, right? It's just Walt Disney, his brother, his other brother, and that's it, right? And of course his mom and his dad, right? And they weren't very nice people, right? His mom and dad, his when he see Walt Disney did the voiceover for Mickey Mouse for decades, and when Mickey Mouse first came out, he took the video and showed it to his mom and said, "What do you think?" And then his mom said, "Oh, Mickey Mouse has a horrid voice." Right. And then when he told his mom, the mom, "That's my voice," she said, "You have a horrid voice." Right.
Wow.
And, imagine that type of mom, imagine that type
Yeah.
of environment that you're growing up,
Aw.
into. Right. But I have to be fair and, fair about it. Walt Disney, I don't really think started out in doing what it's turned out to
Right.
be, because the mob stepped in, right? And the mob took control of Disney and all of the other studios that they own, right? But not only that, but the mob, they controlled the actors union, right? So if you don't have any theaters to show your movies in, right, then what's the point in making movies, right? And then that's how they entrapped Walt Disney, and that's why he was depressed for years and years and years,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and eventually lost his life to that, right? But he actually acquiesced into giving up control so that he can benefit the riches, right? And then that's
Yeah.
really what his downfall was that he was greedy, right? He could have
So
said, "No,
does,
I'm shutting it all down."
does the mob have lineage to the families, or are they just a tool also?
The mob is the Onassis and the Kennedys and the Astors, right? Those are crime families, and then those crime families are, of course, connected with the triads and the yakuza and other crime families around the world. So these mafias that we have in the United States, they're all connected to the bloodlines. Like the Kennedys, for instance, the Kennedys were mobsters, right? They were gangsters before they got into politics, right? The DuPonts, same thing. The Astors, same thing. The Onassis, we already know that they were gangsters. They were involved in the mafia activity in Spain and Greece, and as well as in Italy.
Wow. 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 So do you want to go back just a little bit to what you were talking about, back to Isa and the
Yeah,
bloodlines? Hi,
yeah.
Augie. I think we've got Augie on the phone. Yes? Augie, are you with us?
Yeah, yeah, yes, I'm here on the phone. If you can hear me.
Yay.
I can hear you, Huggy. I wish I could see you,
Oh,
brother.
oh man, oh man. There is not a computer where I can find all the way up to about 5 minutes before the show, then everything shuts down. I couldn't even text Nori. Nothing works out of here until I just got on here now.
Well, we
Wow.
know we know what that's about. So Omar,
Tommy coming.
tell us tell us where it began. Tell us the beginning. It was such a
So
great.
yeah, so this whole story starts more than 2,000 years ago, right? A lot of these families, they go back into the Atlantean times, and they have carried over, and then they've got into the Egyptian priesthood, and then
Augie, you need to mute yourself.
I need to mute the yeah
Okay,
there.
good. You're
I would
okay now.
yeah
Okay.
mute that, yeah, okay, cool. So you know it started long, long, long time ago, but this cabal that we're dealing with today, this globalist cabal, it started about 2,000 years ago after the death of Issa. Well, not the death of Issa, well, the so-called death of Issa. Now, when I say Issa, Issa is another name that's for Jesus. That's how Jesus is known in India. Right now, we all are aware of the missing years of Jesus from the time he was 13, 14 till he was 30 years old. And during that time, he studied with the Assyrians, and then he went, used the Silk Road, and then went over to India, to Afghanistan, into Tibet, and he studied while he was there. And so now, while he was there, he met someone very, very interesting that history has, seriously abused, and people have, simply no idea as to, who this person is. They're just running with the narrative of what they've been told. And I was thinking, right, because I read my friend's book. His name is Kiara Windrider, and he wrote a book called Issa. And I read that book, and I read another book that he sent me, and then I went out and I began doing my own research and began reading. And what I came across is that while Jesus was in India, he went to a temple to learn on his Kundalini energy, on how he can control the Kundalini energy, how he can use that energy to heal people, and how he can, get into the frequency of like the Buddha, right? The Buddha frequency, because Jesus, Issa, is an incarnation of Buddha. Now, the three wise men that came from the east, they actually came from Afghanistan, and then they went to Mary, and they found Jesus. Let me just backtrack here a little bit. And they found Mary, and then when they walked in, they discovered that Mary, Mother Mary, had two children. She had two boys, and they were both twins. One was Issa, and the other one was Thomas. Now, they and these magi, they did the tests and all kinds of tests on these two babies, and it was Issa that was responding as to the way they thought that Buddha would have responded to their questions, because Buddha said that he would reincarnate in 400 or 500 years, and then they had this feeling that Buddha has incarnated, and that's why the magi came over, and they left Mary with gold. Now, I'm not talking about just like a coin or two coins or a couple of nuggets. They left her enough gold to last her entire lifetime. That's how much gold they left her. So obviously she was very, very wealthy after that. But anyways, when Jesus was in India, he went to this temple, and at this temple he met a woman named Marie, right? Meri. Right, and Marie was a priestess at this temple, and then she was tasked with the task to teach Jesus on how to work his Kundalini energy and how to control that energy and how to manifest it when he wants to manifest it. So I've been trying to tell people that Marie is Jesus's teacher. She's not below him. She is his wife, number one. And I actually don't even, I have my doubts on that as well, to the fact that she may have been his wife. But I don't want to go that far, because my research is just simply pointing in totally different direction. And we'll find out why in just a couple of seconds.
Okay.
So Marie is Jesus's teacher. And then when his, 8-9 months was up that he spent in this temple learning from Marie, they became very close. And then Jesus left because he wanted to go to another temple, and he wanted to learn more of Vedic teachings, because everything in Christianity is Vedic. And so he wanted to learn more, and so he did. And then at that time, Marie followed with him, and then they went and they learned together. Right. And as they were learning together, then Jesus said that he had to, go back. He had to go back to Nazareth. And Marie at that time didn't want to come to Nazareth or come to Jerusalem or come to Israel. So she went back to the temples in India. And then it was later that she traveled to Jerusalem and met Issa while he was there. Now, people say that, they were kissing on the mouth, and that Peter was jealous because, Jesus would always, go to Marie for advice, and he would talk to her. Well, it's obvious, because Marie was his teacher in India. And because she's his teacher, of course, he's going to go to her, and he's going to ask her questions and share stuff with her, and maybe toss ideas back and forth, and, just do the thing, right? And but Peter was jealous. Peter didn't like that. And he kept on asking, why do you kiss her on the mouth? Why do you kiss her on the mouth? But, then Marie said, well, it's nobody's business. What happens between Issa and I is transparent to God, and that's all that matters. Wow. Right. So they may have been boyfriend, girlfriend, right? And that's as far as I'm willing to go with that, because, Jesus had a, very powerful, he had very, very powerful people around him, Augie and Nori, because his uncle, Joseph of Marthia, I think is called, right? He was a shipping magnate, and he would go up to England and he would get tin, and then he would bring tin back, and then he would sell it to the Romans. The Romans would buy it, they would make things, and so on and so on, right? So now there's stories and, stories up in England, and there's actually a well called Jesus's well, from the well that Jesus drank out of, because he would go up there with his uncle Joseph on trips when he would go up there to pick up tin, and then he would go and he would talk to druids and he would talk to locals, and he just simply wanted to learn from them. And now Joseph is an interesting guy, right? It's the reason why I told you this, because Joseph had a lot of power. And then when Jesus was, supposedly crucified, right? He was only up on the cross for about 6 hours. And then after 6 hours, he was brought down without a broken leg, because back in those days, they would break your leg to see if you were dead. But Joseph stopped them and said, no, you're not going to break his legs, and you're going to bring him down. And then he tried to stab him with the spear of destiny, stopped him there as well, and said, no, you're not going to stab him either. Because prior to that, he had gone over to one of the governors of the province. And because Joseph held power, right, told the governor that, look, you have a festival happening, you have all these people, there's going to be riots, people are going to be mad, you better take him down. And so he gave him the go ahead and say, okay, you can take his body and do with it as you wish. Now, back in those days, they would only release bodies to family members. They just wouldn't release it to just anyone. So that tells me that Joseph was his uncle, or somewhere along his very immediate family that he was connected with him. So anyways, the beats and stuff that he took, they brought him down, and they did what the Assyrians would do, what he learned with the Assyrians. They did Reiki on him, they did energy work on him, and they healed him. And then after they healed him, then he went back to India. And then that's why I'm saying that I don't think that Jesus, Issa, and Marie were married, because if you were a married couple, you would stay together, right? But Issa decided to go back to Afghanistan, because that's where he's originally from, decided to go back to Afghanistan. And then Marie decided that she was going to go up to France with their daughter, Sophia. Now, Sophia was able to create some kind of a cloak around them, around their ship, so that they can move and go get to France without being detected. Then once they got there, Marie began to spread the gospel and began to talk about the things that she talked about. And people in France picked up on that, and they began to support her. And she became, like a deity almost, very, very revered in France, even up to still to this day. She's extremely revered. In fact, there's a city with a statue or something that's there in the cave that she stayed at. But anywho, right, getting back to the Cabal, right, now Peter was angry with Issa. Peter was jealous of Marie, right? So the bloodlines began there, right? Now we all are aware of Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, right? Now that Da Vinci Code has like somewhat of truth to it, a lot of fiction, but some truth to that, right? Now those bloodlines came from that. The people that supported Marie are the white hats, right? We hear the white hats and the black hats, right? Now, Marie, the families that were protecting Marie, that she was under their protection, they raised her children and, carried the knowledge forward. And those are the ones that became, part of the bloodlines. Now, this cabal that we're dealing with, that cabal comes from Peter. Like Peter's bloodline is what's created this cabal. In the beginning, Peter was doing the gospel and the ministry and things like that. But after a few hundred years, and that got changed, and they got inverted, and then they turned from Jesus as a holy God, and they turned to Satan. And then because from Satan, and they just kept on going, because what they were trying to do was eliminate the bloodline of Issa and of Marie. And up until now, they've been very unsuccessful. But during that time, what they've done is that they've collected and collaborated with other families and intermarried within those families, because these people believe that some families, some bloodlines that go way back to the line of David, right, to the house of David and coming forward, right, they believe that these bloodlines have occult magic within their blood. So if you interbreed, then you keep that magic in the blood within your own same group. So when that magic, kind of runs out in your, in your family, right, then that part of the tree branch is eliminated. They cut it off, throw it away, and they want to have nothing to do with that, and they just stick with the rest. who have the so-called occult magic within their blood. And the entire idea for them is to, number one, take over the world, but their priority is to eliminate the bloodline of Issa and Marie. And then this is now where we're at, right? When we look at the transhumanism and the technology that goes along with transhumanism, we can go back to the time of David, and then to the time of the Gnostics, and to the Archons, and to the demiurge. And the demiurge and the Archons, are, of course, they're technological, and probably have something to do with AI. And since that time, they've been trying to insert that into humanity and trying to make us into that Archon demiurge type of creature, to where our energy and our luge can be harvested on an indefinite period, right? Because once you become mechanical, right, you're not going to die, right? So if you don't die and you continue to live in that low vibration, that very low distortion, then that luge that's left over, that energy that you're creating, becomes food and sustenance for the Archon, right? And then the Archon are, attached to, almost all of us, like kind of like, like octopus tentacles, where they're like literally, stuck on you, and they live with you for your days. And once you become happy and you're vibrating very high, because they vibrate at a low distortion, the connection can't be kept, right? So if you have light right here and darkness, of course, light's going to envelop it, and then they're, and then they snap off, right? And then you become sovereign. But be careful, because once you become sovereign and once you've gotten rid of them, right, then if you fall back into the trap, right, that's what it is. If you fall back into the trap, then they'll come back with 10 friends. Then you're fucked, right? So once you reach that, that enlightenment, that high vibration, then when you're working from your heart space on a 24-hour basis, then unfortunately you have to continue to work from that, because if you stop, then you will get hijacked, and there'll be 10 of them on you, if not more, and they're just going to suck the life right out of you. You ever see 40-year-old people that look like they're 80 years old?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. That's what they're suffering from. Someone who's 40, they look 60. Someone who's 20, they look like they're 50, right? Because they've aged and aged and aged. It's because of this archonic force that's stuck to them. And that's what the bloodlines are connected to. That's what they're serving, right? Is these administrators and managers and stuff. So yeah, there's the background on these.
That's amazing. And it's interesting that you said that, because recently somebody popped up on the internet, in a reel or whatever, and it was an actor that wasn't that old, and literally he looked like he was 80, and I thought, what in God's name happened to him?
Androchrome.
And that's what happens. I mean, if you don't shine your light, the darkness is going to overtake you.
Absolutely. You always live in hate, when you're living in loathing, when you're living in distrust, that creates that low density, and then that loosh, right? And then these things are eating your loosh, and the more they eat your loosh, the more you age, and then you're looking like you're 50 when you're 20, when you actually should be looking like you're 16, right?
Yes.
You were talking about Jesus being married, and some of the old documents that I have researched and found that marriage is basically a recent term, but back then Maria Magdalena was supposed to be his companion. That's how it's written they called it companion, but companion meant the same thing as marriage does today.
Yeah, you're correct on that, but those companionships are also based on contracts, right? It was based on 5-year contract, 7-year contract, 3-year contract. Like I'll be your companion for 5 years. And then after those 5 years, we'll go back and we'll rediscuss whether I enjoyed my experience with you or not. If I didn't, then I'll move on. And if I did, then we'll renew for another 5 years, kind of like a driver's license. And that's how they operated back in those days, right? And then it came. But you know what? The thing that really gets me, Agi, is that, of course, they had a wonderful relationship. They knew each other in India. and then they met up again in Jerusalem, and they had a child together. So obviously they had a very, very good relationship. But what makes me, what throws up my flags and what really confuses me is as to like, why did he go back to India? And then why did she go to France, right? If they were a married couple and they kept their, union, then you figure they would have moved along together, right? But together they would have went to India, or together they would have went to France, or whatever the case may be. It could have been that there was a bounty on Jesus's head, and he got exiled out of the Roman Empire and couldn't come back. But again, there's too many stories of Issa. There's a story, there's a grave of Issa in India, and there's a temple around that, and then there's a grave of Issa in Japan, where the story is that he came to Japan, and he stayed there, and he lived there until he died. He was 101 years old. He had 3 daughters, and he became a garlic farmer. And then there's stories in North America where the Mormons say that Jesus Christ was here in North America, and that he hung out with them, and he gave them scriptures, and he taught them, and then he left, right? But my question is that who actually went to Japan? Who actually went to the United States? Because he had a twin, right? He had an identical twin, Thomas, right? So was it Jesus that went to China? Was it Jesus that came to the United States or America, as we know today, Turtle Island, right? Or was it his brother Thomas that carried his teaching, came to North America, taught people, jumped the pond, went to Japan and taught people there, and then eventually went to India, and then he was martyred in India. And there's a grave of him there. There's a temple based around him. There's just too many connections with the biblical characters in India. Moses is buried in India. Why would Moses be buried in India, right? It just simply makes no sense. Like, why would, if he's supposed to be, a Christian, part of the Christian deity group, then you figure he would just have remained in Israel, but he didn't. He went back to India. So it makes you question again, was Moses Indian?
Yes.
Right? Did Moses come to, Israel, to Jerusalem and to Palestine, and then did his thing, parted the river, burnt the bush? I personally think he was burning this bush, but then I burnt the bush, and then went back to India and lived the whole life and died naturally, right? So there's a lot of history that is being hidden from us and is being passed on to us as narrative to, to support a Roman narrative is really what it's come down to, right? But but these families, I'm telling you, they're connected with government agencies around the world. They're connected with agencies like the Council of Foreign Relations and things like that, where they make policies, think tanks, mafias, secret societies like the Society of Cincinnati. What's the other one? The Skull and Bones. It just goes on. And so many of them. There's just so many of them. It's hard to keep track on. There's like thousands of these secret societies, of these like little clubs that they got going on. And
there's a bunch of them.
Yeah,
now,
and it's
you
impossible to actually get into them.
mentioned also Family of 300. There is also a group called the Committee of 300.
That's right. The
and
Committee
those
of
are
300.
probably those families.
The Committee of 300 is actually connected to the MJ12. And the MJ12 is the one that set up, well, the Committee of 300 was first set up as part of like the Council of Foreign Relations, right? Maybe there's representatives of like each one of the families there, but I doubt it, right? They're never going to send one of their own. They're going to send a lackey, right? And you go and do the work. We don't want to be seen, right? So I'm thinking that it's connected to that, but definitely that 300 was then turned, and then it came under the administration of MJ12, and then MJ12, of course, is an independent think tank. It's an independent institution to where they don't answer to anyone. Right? They just simply advise the president, the vice president, Speaker of the House, things like that. It's the top echelon of the government, and they tell them what they need to do, and then the puppet in the White House does what they're being told, because the MJ12 is connected, to the powerful families, to the 13 families, and those 13, 14 families are really the ones that are the most powerful ones, right? You got the other 300, right? You get 300 of them as all together, all of them, right? But then some of them become like cousins, right? Oh, that's a second cousin. It doesn't really matter much. They still got a little thing to do here and there, but nothing much. But look at the Rothschilds over here, right? They got the money, they got the banks, they're the important ones. So it kind of works like that, right? So that's why I was saying there's 13 of them that are like really in control, that are like administering this world. But when you look at the pyramid, they're not at the top of the pyramid, right? They're not the capstone. They're just below that capstone. And those guys from up there, the Archons, they're at the capstone. And the three families, they would be at that capstone. And then they're taking orders from whoever, and then they're sending it down the line. And then the Rothschilds and the Fellers and things like that, the Astors, they just simply take direction and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's kind of like back in the 20s and 30s and ever since then, how the mob meets every 5 years, right? Or actually, it used to be every 5 years, and they turned it to once a year, and then now they meet once a year, and they discuss their plans on, which territory.
Is that the Bilderbergs? Is that the Bilderbergs?
The Bilderbergs are something different. The Bilderbergs are part of like these families that they've created, the Bilderbergers, right? They're kind of like the Council of Foreign Relations, kind of the same thing, but just a little bit different, right? Like the WEF that we have, the World Economic Forum, is the same thing as a CFR or as the Bilderberg Group. It's same thing, with just a different name, with different representatives, with different agendas that are carrying forth this agenda that was carried out and was written out in 1871 by a guy by the name of Albert Pike. Albert Pike was a 33-degree Mason, and Albert Pike had sent this letter to this guy named Mazzini Giuseppe. And Mazzini Giuseppe was a 33-degree Mason himself. And within that letter, Albert Pike outlined on the three world wars, on what was going to happen and what was to come out of those wars. Yeah. This is called the Hagelin dialect, right? The Hagelin dialect is that you have the opposites, kind of like, if, let's say if you're a shop owner and I'm a gangster and I come to you and I say, Nori, you're going to have to give me $500 a month for protection. And you look at me and you say, like the fuck I am, get out of my store, right? I say, oh, okay. And then now you don't know who Augie is, but Augie works for me. And then Augie comes to you and says, hey, you give me $250 a month and I'll make sure that Omar leaves you alone. And then you say, oh, okay, I'll give you, that's better to give you 250 than it is to give him 500, right? So that's called the Hagelin dialect, right? Another way I can demonstrate it is Russia and the Soviet Union and the capitalists, right? Over in Russia, they're telling you, in the Soviet Union, they're telling you the capitalism is bad. Over here, capitalism is telling you that communism is bad. Right now, those two have a dialect. Now they're clashing with one another, right? Eventually, those two are going to get into a fight. And then after they get into a fight, out of that fight will come something new. Now, something new, World War I happened, and then we had the League of Nations come out. World War II happened, we had the UN, right? So when the World War III happens, what comes out of that? Right? And then this is what Albert Pike outlined in his letter to Giuseppe, saying that World War I, when that happens, maybe he was remote viewing, or, maybe he was just simply, writing down a diabolical agenda that they wanted to carry forth. Because I've always thought about that. It's like, okay, well, if I'm here today, and if I get my sons to carry out some kind of an agenda, how does that benefit me in 100 years? Unless I have the knowledge that you can have directed incarnation. Directed incarnation means that, say I'm a part of the, Rothschild's family, right? Say I'm Cher Rothschild, right? And I set out this plan, and now I want to come back in 100 years, 150 years. You can direct that energy, your energy, into that particular family energy, and you can incarnate back into that particular bloodline, right? That's why they're always saying magic, 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 right? In these bloodlines, because in these bloodline, what happens is that when somebody is born, that person is, they're observed to see what type of gifts that they have, what type of extrasensory abilities that they have, and if they are an incarnation of someone else, how do they carry themselves, how do they behave, how do they speak. And then once they figure out what this gift that this person may possibly have, then that person is moved from the family and put into the custody of a family member who specializes in that particular gift, and then they become a mentor to that person, and then they raise them. So I'm thinking that because there could be a targeted incarnation, that's why these people are able to carry out these plans that last centuries, right? So if
Wow.
you're in 1871, you're, Albert Pike, how does it help you in 2020? Why are you going to do this to the world, right? Like, why would you do this to the world if there was no benefit for you? Right. So
Right.
obviously there's benefit. You can come back again and again and again, like a video game, jump in, do what you got, carry the agenda forward, move along. And then that's one of the reasons why I feel is that they want to bring in transhumanism. That's why they want to make everybody into a board, because they don't want to continuously incarnate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They want to come in, they want to stay,
I-
and that's it. They don't want to move any further. They want to become, Hugh.
Wow. I tell you, this is getting down to the end of the show here, and it is amazing. It is just mind-blowing that a conspiracy so huge and so deep can run the world. But before we leave, I want to read something that J. Edgar Hoover said in a speech at the Elks Club in 1956. And is written up in Elks magazine, August 1956. You can go look it up. And he said, and I quote, I wrote it down, so I gotta make sure I get it right for you. The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous, he cannot believe it exists. The American mind simply has not come to a realization that the evil which has been introduced into our midst, it rejects even the assumption that human creatures could expose a philosophy that must ultimately destroy all that is good and decent.
Mhm.
With other words, he explained the global conspiracy. And
Is
who
that
else? Yeah, he should know, the head of the FBI at 1956.
Hoover? Yeah, it kind of sounds like he's uttering the same words as what Don Juan. Don Juan said. Don Juan kind of said the very same thing, and he actually added to it. He said, take a look at humanity, right? Take a look at the mindset of humanity. Humans, look at their engineering capabilities. Look at the things that they can build. Look what they can draw. Look what they can do with themselves. But yet, you look at their belief system, and it's just it's a contrast to one another, right? Our belief system is Stone Age, but our philosophy and our education and our awareness to our physical world is like way up here, right? So that's kind of what it sounds like to me. And J. Edgar Hoover, he himself was a 33-degree Mason. He was part of the Skull and Bones, and he was also knighted by what's her name? The lizard that just died. Elizabeth Mountbatten. That's it. Elizabeth Mountbatten was knighted by him, and so yeah, and anything that's connected to that, we just simply, you can bet your ass that is diabolical, and that it does not serve humanity whatsoever. These people they're not human. Right? It's number one thing that I should really make it clear. We know from all the videos that we watch, from all the interviews that we've done, and all the conferences that we've been at, and all the people that we've listened to in these conferences, we have come to learn that ET is walking amongst us on this planet, and that ET looks just like us. Right? You could be standing on a street corner, and you can turn and look at someone that's sitting next to you or standing next to you, and you look at them and you say, well, that person looks a little odd, right? Still appears to be a human, but looks a little odd. right? And then you pay no attention to it and you just keep on moving and you forget about it and that's it. Now that person that looks really odd that was standing next to you, more than likely is an ET visitor who is walking around and taking their life, putting their life on the line, essentially, because they're not allowed to be armed as they're walking around down here. They have to appear to be like us. Maybe they're changing their vibration. Maybe they're changing their distortion to appear like we are, or they actually do just look like us and are amongst us. And then this cabal that we're dealing with, guys like Hoover and Charles Mountbatten and all of these people, I am willing to bet that they are not human. They're blue bloods, and they are of extraterrestrial descent that have hijacked our planet, and more than likely hijacked our planet about 12,000 years ago. And from that time forward, they've run a campaign of abduction. And what they've done is tinker with our DNA, and they've taken our extrasensory abilities that was available to all of us and turned it into this fear factor that we live in today with this reptilian brain. Because if we really think about it, Nori and Augie, is that when we go back in time, we hear about the story of the Tower of Babel. Right now, the Tower of Babel says that the entire world at one time spoke a single language. How is that even possible when there's 100,000 different dialects of languages on this planet? You move from village to village to village to village, and it's a different dialect. You go to India, there's 100 different type of dialects that are happening, probably even more. You go to China, there's like 500 different dialects of Chinese that is being spoken. So there's hundreds of thousands of different languages on this planet, but yet we're being told that at one time, everyone spoke the same language. Now, what I hypothesize on that is that the language that they're talking about is the language of thought, that we were telepathic, that we could make a long distance phone call from here to Florida to California, and that we could telepathically communicate with one another. And when this war happened that destroyed Mars, that we hear about in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and those epics that we hear about, when that war happened, we lost that war. And when we lost that war, they began abducting our women. Men, when you look at ET abductions, 8 out of 10 people that are abducted are women. Why? We have to ask that question. Why is that the case? Well, the reason that the case is that it's going to be very, very difficult for them to genetically manipulate the man, right? Because we have millions of eggs, right? So it's going to be very difficult to manipulate millions of eggs. But when a woman is born, when a girl is born with an X amount of eggs, right? She's born with those eggs, and those eggs will release through her lifetime, and those eggs can be genetically manipulated. So what they've done is that they've abducted our women and genetically manipulated those eggs so that when those eggs become fertile and whatever that's born out of that, that aspect, that reptilian brain will be just a little bit bigger, just a tad bit bigger, and it'll take away from that extrasensory part of our brain and it'll just make it smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Reptilian brain gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So our, common sense gets lost. We can't, telepathically or, extrasensorily communicate with anyone. We've lost our connection to the earth, but we live in fear. And that is exactly what they want us to be in, is to live in fear, because when we live in fear.
We are running so much over here, Nori.
So wait, let me say, Omar, so people are texting me saying, when is part 2? So you have to come back and see us again, please.
I would love to. You guys know me. You send an invite and it's always a yes. I love you guys, because every time I ask you guys to come on to my conferences and come on to my shows, you guys never say no. You're like, yep, I'm down. And so I love you guys, and I love talking to you guys. We've been friends for years now, and I'd love to come back. Part 2, part 3, I don't care. It's just whenever. Shoot me a message and we'll set up a time and date, and I'll be there.
Sounds
both Nori and I have been on your conferences several times, and I think there's one coming up where I'm on it still.
Yeah, I got one called the Magic Box Timelines. That is coming up on November 11th, 12th, 13th, long weekend. And I've got 16 speakers featuring 5 speakers a day. And each speaker has about an hour and a half to them. So like an hour presentation, 45-minute presentation, and then we'll do like a half hour, 45-minute conversation, take questions from the audience, and just have a a chill day and try to understand, because the idea behind this is that, number one, this is an ongoing thing that I've been doing with Stephen and Evan Strong from Australia for the last 3 years, part of the Magic Box that we've
Let
been
people
doing.
know. Let people know the website where they can go and participate in that.
They can. Well, I was going to tell them to come to my YouTube channel, because the idea was to stream to my channel, but that's not happening anymore. So, but I'll be streaming that to my Odyssey account, and as well as my Watchers Talk network. And also I'm going to stream with my brother from another mother, Rob Yox, from Full Spectrum Universe. So on YouTube, it'll be on Full Spectrum Universe and Watchers Talk Network. And then the other one is going to be on Odyssey, because I find that the Odyssey people, they don't come to YouTube, and they hate YouTube. And I have like a very good following. Like that last event that I streamed there, I had a solid like 900 people watching all day, right? Like solid, it didn't drop, right? So I love Odyssey for that, so I'm going to continuously create content for Odyssey, and then just kind of just slowly move myself off of YouTube, because I'm really tired of being canceled, and tired of just taking this abuse from these people. And I'm no longer a Kabbalist prostitute. I am like, I've dropped my name, right? Like my name Omar, I don't use that anymore. I've adopted a frequency, because I realized that there's an Om in my name. So I've taken Om with the R. So I've dropped my last name, that label, that identity, and I've adopted the frequency as myself. And because I'm adapting to that, and because I'm shedding the other things, it's just going to be a matter of time before I'm just completely off YouTube, and just solely on Odyssey or another platform that doesn't discriminate against me and allows me to talk freely, and tell people what's on my mind, right? And that's it.
Well, we love you, and we support you 125%. We're right behind you. Yeah. Augie, do you want to take us out? We're so over time.
Yeah, well, it was wonderful, whatever, at least the part that I got to hear.
Thank you. It was all amazing.
Yeah, it's just amazing how things happened. About 5 minutes before the show, everything goes down, but we're alive and well, and we're going to stay that way. And Omar, good luck to you. And until next week, be good to each other.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Omar. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
In the words of Spock, live long and prosper.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.